Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to talk about Arbor Adventures, and we're continuing in session 4. And so at this point, the Sun Elf assassin Doulos has gotten out of the Garnet, has escaped the flood in the Garnet mine in Phandalin, and escaped it with a teleport circle that went all the way from Phandalin to the underground levels of a manse in Neverwinter. And that manse is owned by Neverwinter Garnet merchant Jesp, who's a tiefling. And so at this point, there's a moment of safety, right? And finally, Sun Elf assassin Doulos has reunited with his brother. Okay. However, his brother's girlfriend at this point, he's not aware of that. The character is not aware of that. Doulos is not aware of that. But at this point, and actually, Vornway was not even Doulos' brother's girlfriend, right? He was in love with her. Period. That was it. That was the whole, extension of it, right? And so at that point, there's this situation where they are looking to, And so basically, at that point, the brother is upset because Vornway is dead, and Vornway is dead because the player chose to leave Vornway in the flooded mine, right? And just take literally just a bog standard dwarf miner, in her place. Stunning, like different direction for the story. I did not expect it, right? And so Doulos' brother is very upset right now because Vornway is there. But Doulos now has this, this opportunity to talk to him, and he says, and he begins to say, and he asks, I think he starts and he says, I've chased after you because you've been missing. What's been going on? And his brother immediately says, Vornway didn't come through. And Doulos is like, who is Vornway, right? Because he doesn't know, right? And Doulos' brother is like, why did you come seeking after me? And so they start, and Doulos says, you were missing. And then he asked Doulos asks his brother, why were you seeking after me? And he says, I was trying to get information for the Hate of Vecna, and Vornway had information on the blade, and I was trying to help her find the blade, and we're seeking the blade. Now, the Hate of Vecna, this cursed dagger, is sitting literally inside his cloak, right? And so I said, and so there's this point where Doulos can say, can literally pull the dagger out and say, everything you've been searching for is literally within your arm's reach, right? But he doesn't say that. And why? Because he's a Sun Elf assassin, man. His brooding is dark and long, right? Like his brooding is like, it's next level, right? And this is fascinating. So if you play a super dope assassin, you get to read people, right? But part of that is you're not like the sunniest person on the branch, and there's a lot of social interaction that doesn't happen, right? And so Doulos is like, well, I got to find the Hate of Vecna, like, which is sitting in the same room with him. All his brother has to do is just pull it out and show it to him, right? And then he's like, and I got to find Vornway, right? Now, get this. Doulos knows Vornway's dead, right? Now, it's 99%. He saw the flood, and honestly, this is a problem, right? I did not have the time to, there literally wasn't, they had to go from one teleportation circle to another. It was very, and so I literally didn't have the opportunity to show her on-screen death, right? But, we have this history in movies where, especially like Star Wars, right? Any on-screen death never sticks. Good grief, any off-screen death never sticks, right? Often on-screen deaths barely, Darth Maul. You know, like he was cut in half. You know, like they found him in, you know. So my point is, Vorn Way is dead, right? And actually, Doulos is completely aware of this, right? So his brother goes off, right? So the mystery is solved, right? And get this, this was the end of a story arc, right? And it was really fascinating, right? And in that, I was like, you've completed your adventure. You found your brother, right? You know he's safe. You know exactly where he's been the last few months. You know what he's been up to, right? But there was no resolution, right? Or actually, yeah, there was no resolution because he's still at odds with his brother, and there's still a bunch of questions, right? So I thought that was very interesting that the story went in this really unique direction where, you know, and this is the thing I love about Dungeons & Dragons, and this is that ever so important part. And this did not come from the dice. This came from the player, right? Like, and I love that. Like, there's three sources for a Dungeons & Dragons story: the Dungeon Master, the Dragon Master, and the dice. It's DDD, triple D, right? Like, it's really, I find it absolutely fascinating, right? So at this point, Eof, the dwarf leader, right, is like, hey, and Doulos' brother just leaves the manse, like, I'm gone, right? And Doulos is a little stunned. He's there with Dragonborn warrior Grax, who is his ally. And Eof says, hey, you've done a fantastic job. You saved my life, and you saved, you know, these two dwarves' lives. And more important than that, we're the only, I think, you know, based on, and Eof saw it too, like the flood was incredible, right? And actually, to put this in perspective, Demeth, the woodcutter leader, he slew 54 dwarves, right? That was his opening gambit in the dwarf minor human woodcutter war, right, in Phandalin, right? That's pretty brutal and bloody, right? Now, actually, there was no blood; everybody drowned, but you know what I'm saying, right? But Eof is like, we're alive, and more than this, I can now go back to Phandalin, and I can tell Thera that we're at war, right? Because without that warning, this could be a lot worse than it is, and I'm going to be able to tell my master, right? What's going on. And so she says, and so then she rewards Doulos. Now, this is where it gets interesting, right? So one of the things that is so fantastic about this campaign is we're using Crown and Skull rules, but we're using Dungeons & Dragons rules. However, Crown and Skull is actually, it's a better iteration of the Index Card RPG, right? And which was an incredible refinement of Dungeons & Dragons already. And so I'm using equipment from both worlds. So and another reason why I decided to use equipment from Crown and Skull was the Dragon Master read into the Crown and Skull book and said, "Oh my gosh, did you see the crown equipment and the skull equipment, right?" And he was like, I want to start to work toward that, right? So I had actually prepared some skull equipment for him, right? But the story did not go in the direction I expected, right? And I didn't want this story arc to end without him getting a major piece of treasure, right? Because he had completed an entire story arc. There's a big card in my notes, brother missing. Now the brother isn't missing. He solved the mystery, right? He went to the end of the quest, right? And this is another thing that, like, a quest can be finished, but there's still more to do, right? And I think it's like a profound thing of life, right? The quest can be finished, but that doesn't mean you're done, right? There's so much more to do, right? If you're engaged with the world, right? IRL world, right? So basically, at this point, I went to the Crown and Skull, I went to the crown equipment, and this is a major artifact, right? Like, this would be this would be considered a wondrous item in D&D at that level, right? And I gave him the Arconyx ring. So in Crown and Skull, the Arconyx ring is when you rest, when you take a long rest, and actually when you rest, that's what it says in Crown and Skull, which equals a long rest in D&D. You roll 3d12. That becomes a store for the entire day, and you could dump it into any roll you want. What? Right, yeah, you just heard that. Huge, right? Like, so let's say you roll 2d8 to do damage, and you get a 4 and a 6. That's 10. and you had rolled your Arconics ring 3d12 and you have like 16 points. You could dump all 16 points right into the damage roll, which is like, what? Like it is major. So basically this thing it's better than like D&D luck. It's extremely powerful, right? Now, I said, so Eof is like, hey, an adventurer died, right? And by the way, in my games, adventures, they're the real treasure chests, right? Like, I don't spend a lot of time with people going down into dungeons, right? Like, there's just so many more exciting things in cities and towns and in, the forest, right? I'll spend a lot of time in dungeons, right? So people aren't opening up treasure chests. What's happening is they kill a major adventurer, or a major adventurer dies, and that adventurer's gonna have 2-3 magic items off them, right? Because they've spent a lifetime adventuring, right? So they're the real treasure chests. So Eof, they had gotten this ring at the Garnet Mine, and she had specifically put it aside to give to Thera, the dwarf miner leader. And so what ends up happening is she gives it directly to Doulos, right? And so I give it to him, and he's like, wait, right? This is crown equipment. I thought you had to be a crown member in order to use it, right? It's a great point, right? So the reason I said, yes, that's correct, but that doesn't extend beyond death, right? That means that like the crown, the people in the crown organization, they give this equipment only to crown members. They would never sell it. They would never give it away. But when one of their members dies, it doesn't stop functioning, right? And that means crown equipment can fall into a wrong area. Now, if that happens, you could bet there's going to be some crown people who go on a quest to find it, if they can, right? So I was like, so the reality is you don't have crown affiliation, but this person died and you have it. Now, the reality is, and then I said, your character Doulos, you can put this on and you can start using this extremely powerful crown magic item, or you can go on a quest to return it to the crown, right? And in this game, crown aligns with the Harpers, and specifically the Lord's Alliance, right? So actually, the Lord's Alliance is specifically crown because it's the leaders of Waterdeep. It's the Lord of Neverwinter. It's all these nobles from all these high areas, right? Forgotten Realms doesn't actually have a king or a queen, right? But they do have lords, the open lords and the masked lords, and they have lords in the city, right? So those are the kings. Those are crowns, right? And many of them do wear crowns, but they may not be a king, right? So I thought that was really fascinating. And I will say this, the question did kind of stun me, because I was like, yeah, and the other thing is, I don't wait for the awesome, right? I don't assume that my campaigns are going to go on for months and months and months, right? If there's some major, piece of equipment that the players are interested in, I'm going to give them a taste, right? I'm not going to wait for it. And the reason why is I've been there, man. I've sat on so many tables where they're like, oh yeah, it sucks now, and it'll suck for 6 months. But boy, is it going to be great 8 months from now, and then 2 months later, the DM moves, right? Like, don't do that. Don't wait for the awesome. Get it in, right? And you're like, well, what if it's too awesome too soon? Run another campaign, right? Like make stuff happen, right? So I was excited that he was excited about Crown and Skull equipment. I was expecting him to get some Skull equipment first, right? But and I had a path for that, but Vornway's death completely changed the story, right? Which I thought was really fascinating. So at this point, he doesn't know what to do, there was a question of, do you return home? Does Doulos return home and start to deal with the Sun Elves family that he has, that has a tradition of raising assassins, right, and training assassins secretly within the community? And then I was like, also, are you going to return this ring? And he said, you know what? I'm going to find my brother, right? And so he does. He does some investigation rolls. He attempts to find his brother. He cannot find his brother, right? And so Grax says, listen, I know a guy who's taken some equipment. We can do caravan guard duty at 100 gold pieces a day each, right? And I know you want to find your brother, but sometimes the best way to find something is to stop looking, right? And see if it finds you. So actually, it was really cool. The Gold Dragon Master was like, I don't know what to do. And he said, but that's okay. I always have a decision. And then he literally rolled odds or evens to go with Grax's plan or not. And it came up that Grax's plan would be in place, which was good because this is him building a stronger relationship with his ally. So it was a fantastic session. That is the end of session 4. And at the end of session 4, he has this Arconyx ring, which is a major magical artifact. He's upping his powers. And then also, there is this, and then also, he accepts a job doing caravan guard duty, which I thought was really interesting, right? And at 100 gold a day, which is very good pay, from Neverwinter down to Waterdeep. And that's where we ended session 4. Thank you so much for letting me share this with you. Please consider liking and subscribing. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion on the best parts of Session 4 of Arbor Adventures, Dungeons & Dragons Forgotten Realms setting, Crown and Skull rules. Please consider liking or subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.